The night we checked into the hotel should have been the happiest night of my life. The air was warm, the city lights glittered outside our window, and the bed was covered in rose petals the staff had scattered while we were at dinner. I remember standing there in my suit jacket, holding a glass of champagne, thinking that after all the stress of planning, all the late nights and compromises, it was finally just us. My wife sat on the edge of the bed, still in her dress, her eyes reflecting the glow of the lamp, and for a moment I thought she looked like everything I had ever dreamed of. But then she smiled in a way I could not read. Not the carefree grin she had flashed at the altar, not the tired but genuine smile she gave when relatives pulled her aside during the reception. This one was smaller, tighter, as if she were holding something back. I asked if she was okay, if she needed water or to take her shoes off. She shook her head, said she was fine, and then went quiet again. The silence between us felt heavier than it should have, and I found myself staring at the bubbles in my glass instead of at her. We had spent months rushing, pushing, trying to fit love into deadlines. I chalked her expression up to exhaustion, nerves, maybe even the weight of realizing that marriage is more than just music and flowers. But then she leaned back against the headboard, her fingers twisting the edge of her veil, and I felt the first flicker of unease. When I finally joined her on the bed, she rested her head on my shoulder. I thought the moment was perfect again, thought maybe I had been imagining the tension. But then she exhaled, a long heavy breath, and said my name like she was about to tell me something I might not want to hear. My stomach tightened. All day, I had been waiting for little moments to sink in. The vows, the rings, the first kiss as husband and wife. But in that instant, I realized there was something else waiting for me, something she had been carrying in silence. She lifted her face toward me, her eyes searching mine, and I could feel her pulse through the hand she placed on my chest. I remember saying, "You can tell me anything," came out soft, reassuring, like I believed the words. But inside, I felt a chill I couldn't shake. Because the way she looked at me wasn't how a bride looks at her new husband. It was how someone looks when they are about to drop a weight they can't carry anymore. She hesitated, lips parting and closing again, and I almost wished she would stop. I would have been fine with silence, with slipping into the night pretending everything was perfect. But she didn't stop. Her fingers gripped the fabric of my shirt, her voice low enough that it trembled, and she began to speak. I didn't catch all of it at first. My thoughts tangled with the rhythm of her voice, the sound of traffic faint through the window, the hum of the air conditioner. It was only when she repeated herself, slower this time, that the words cut through. My chest tightened. I didn't respond right away. I sat there, staring at her, my mouth dry, my mind fumbling for meaning. The glow from the lamp painted shadows across her face, and in that light she looked more like a stranger than the woman I had promised forever to. My hands trembled, not from anger, but from the dawning realization that whatever dream I had built for us might already be cracking apart. I swallowed hard, my eyes fixed on the champagne glass now sitting forgotten on the nightstand. And while she kept talking, explaining, justifying, filling the room with words that no longer felt like they belonged on our wedding night, I felt something inside me sink. The honeymoon had only just begun, but I already knew it would be remembered for something other than love. Her words settled in the room like smoke. I blinked, trying to make sense of them, hoping I had misheard, but she kept going. She said she wanted to be honest now that we were officially married, that there was something I deserved to know. Her voice was steady, but I could feel her body tense against mine. She told me she had said yes to marrying me because she was pregnant. She framed it as if it were a noble choice, as if she had done it for us, for the future we had always talked about. I stared at her lips moving and struggled to connect the woman in front of me to the vows she had spoken hours earlier. I didn't explode. I didn't shout. My throat was too tight for anything loud. I just asked her to repeat herself, and when she did, the words dug deeper. She insisted she loved me, that marrying me had always been in her heart, but that the pregnancy forced her to speed up the timeline. She wanted me to know I wasn't trapped, that she had given me the truth because that was what partners were supposed to do. I nodded slowly, though nothing inside me felt steady. The room was too quiet except for her voice. The petals on the bedspread looked absurd now, like props in a play we were both failing to perform. I reached for the champagne, not because I wanted to toast, but because I needed something in my hands. My knuckles whitened around the stem of the glass. Part of me wanted to believe it was just nerves, that the words carried less weight than they sounded. But the way she avoided my eyes told me she had rehearsed this moment. She had decided that tonight, of all nights, she would unburden herself. My heart raced, not from love but from the dread creeping into my chest. I asked her if she had planned to tell me before the wedding. She shook her head slowly, then said she thought it would be easier afterward, once the promises had been sealed. Easier. The word stuck in my throat like a stone. She said she had not wanted me to feel forced, but her timing made it impossible to believe. I wanted to ask 100 questions. When did she find out? Why had she waited? Did she think I would never notice the rushed engagement, the sudden pressure to set a date, the way she brushed off my questions about starting a family so soon? But the questions tangled inside me, too sharp to release. Instead, I looked at her and asked one thing. Did she marry me or for the child? The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Her lips parted, but the answer did not come quickly. And in the gap between her hesitation and her words, I already knew what she would say. She whispered that she loved me, but that the pregnancy had changed everything. She said she thought I would have left if she told me earlier. She said she did not want to lose me. Each sentence was meant to soothe, but every word felt like another cut. I turned away, staring at the city lights through the glass. Cars passed below. People moved on sidewalks, strangers living lives unbroken by confessions like this. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed in a suit that still smelled of cologne and roses. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back, the weight of her touch suddenly unbearable. My silence made her shift nervously. She asked if I hated her now, if I regretted saying I do. The truth was I didn't even know how to answer. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her the way I had yesterday either. I was floating somewhere between, caught in the wreckage of a future that had just been rewritten. I left the champagne untouched on the table and slipped under the covers. Not because I was tired, but because I couldn't keep staring at her. She lay beside me eventually, the distance between our bodies more vast than any ocean. Sleep never came. The night stretched on endlessly, filled with silence, broken only by the sound of her breathing and the pounding of my own heart. The days after the honeymoon felt like I was living in a house of glass, every surface fragile, every word one misstep away from shattering. She tried to carry on as if nothing had changed, filling our apartment with the rhythm of routines, kisses on the cheek before work, dinner waiting when I came home. But beneath the normal gestures was a tension we both felt, a silence humming under every exchange. I told myself I could accept it, that love meant sacrifice, that marriage meant weathering storms. I repeated those lines to myself like prayers, hoping they would cover the crack she had opened. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet, doubt crept in. I would replay her confession, the way her eyes dropped, the way her fingers twisted her veil, and a voice inside me whispered that there was more I didn't know. The pregnancy loomed over everything. Her hands resting on her stomach, the way she avoided wine at dinners, the casual way she mentioned doctor appointments. Every reminder tied a knot in my chest. I wanted to be happy, to imagine cribs and lullabies, but the unease gnawed at me. Was this truly mine to imagine? Or was I building dreams on borrowed ground? One evening, while she was showering, I found myself sitting at the desk, staring at her planner. The thought came uninvited but persistent. I opened it, flipping through pages filled with neat handwriting. Dates circled, notes about work, reminders about appointments. It was the earliest entries that made my pulse quicken. Notes that predated our wedding plans. Reminders that didn't fit the story she had given me. She had known sooner than she admitted. I closed the planner quickly, guilt burning my cheeks. But once suspicion takes root, it doesn't stop growing. I started noticing little inconsistencies. Stories that shifted slightly when I asked twice. Glances at her phone when messages lit up the screen. A distance in her voice when I asked if she was excited about the baby. She always smiled and said yes, but the smile never reached her eyes. I told myself I was being paranoid, that stress was twisting my perception. But the unease became unbearable. Finally, one afternoon when she was out, I drove to a clinic across town. My hands shook as I filled out the paperwork, as I asked questions I never thought I would need to ask. The nurse spoke softly, explaining how a paternity test could be done discreetly, how I could have answers before the child was even born. I left with a pamphlet tucked into my jacket, the paper feeling heavier than stone. That night, sitting at the dinner table, I watched her laugh at something on television. The sound should have warmed me, but it only deepened the ache, because I no longer knew if I was laughing beside my partner or a stranger. I stared at the pamphlet hidden in the drawer and felt the walls of our home closing in. The decision came quietly, without a dramatic revelation. I scheduled the test, told myself it was the only way to silence the doubts. But beneath that justification was a darker truth. I already suspected the answer. I already felt it in my bones. The day of the appointment, I told her I had errands. She kissed my cheek, unaware, and I felt a hollow ache where love should have been. At the clinic, I handed over the samples, my voice low, my heart pounding. The technician assured me results would come soon. I nodded, left, and drove aimlessly through the city, unable to face going home. That night, lying beside her, I studied the rise and fall of her chest, the softness of her features as she slept. I wanted to believe this was still the woman I had chosen, that the vows we had spoken still meant something. But the silence between us was filled with questions that no whispered apology could erase. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the truth I already feared. The envelope arrived on a Thursday afternoon, slipped quietly into the mailbox as though it carried nothing more important than a bill. I held it in my hands for a long time, staring at my name printed neatly on the front. My chest tightened as if my body already knew what the paper inside would say. I carried it into the bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The sound of her humming in the kitchen felt miles away. My fingers trembled as I tore the seal. The words were clinical, stripped of emotion, but every sentence cut deeper than a scream. The probability of paternity was listed in stark numbers. 0. The world seemed to tilt around me. My mouth went dry, and I felt a sharp buzzing in my ears. I read the line again and again, but the result never changed. The child she carried was not mine. For a long time I just sat there, staring at the paper until the letters blurred. I thought of our vows, of the petals scattered on the hotel bed, of the smile she wore as she walked down the aisle. Every memory soured, rotting in the shadow of this truth. My hands clenched the envelope until the paper crumpled. She called my name from the kitchen, her voice soft and casual, unaware that the ground beneath us had just collapsed. I stood, folded the results into my pocket, and walked toward her. She turned with a smile, holding a spoon, the smell of dinner filling the room. For a brief moment, I almost believed I could stay silent, pretend ignorance, live out the lie for the sake of peace. But then I looked at her, really looked, and the words broke free. I told her I knew. I told her the test proved everything I had suspected. Her face drained of color, the spoon clattering against the counter. She stammered at first, tried to explain, but the explanations came out thin and desperate. She said she was scared, that she thought I would leave if I knew, that she convinced herself marrying me would make it right. Her tears fell fast, and her voice cracked with apologies. I listened, but the words no longer reached me. They felt like echoes from a distance, faint and hollow. The truth was already carved in stone. I felt no anger then, only a deep, hollow ache. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the folded results, and set them on the counter between us. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. I told her I was leaving. She begged me to stay, said we could raise the child together, that love could overcome the mistake. Her voice grew frantic, her hands clutching at the air between us as if she could pull me back. But love built on lies is not love at all. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed the small suitcase I had packed days earlier when the doubts had finally become unbearable, and returned to the doorway. Her sobs followed me, filling the apartment, echoing off the walls that had once held laughter. I paused, not because I doubted my decision, but because the weight of finality pressed hard against my chest. Then I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and let the silence swallow her cries. The air outside was cool, the city alive with sounds of strangers going about their lives. I stood on the sidewalk with my suitcase, the envelope still in my pocket, and felt something sharp and clean cut through the haze. It was not relief, not yet, but it was clarity. The marriage had ended before it had truly begun, and I was free of the illusion I had tried to build. In the weeks that followed, she sent messages, long paragraphs filled with regret and pleading. I did not respond. The ring she once wore sat heavy in my drawer, a reminder of the vows that had been nothing more than fragile words. The future I had imagined was gone, but in its place was the chance to rebuild, to live without secrets weighing me down. When I think of that night on the honeymoon now, I no longer replay her voice or her eyes. I remember the silence that followed, the stillness that told me the truth long before the test confirmed it. And I know I made the only choice I could. Some confessions cannot be forgiven. Some truths are too heavy to carry. My story did not end with love. It ended with a suitcase, an envelope, and the sound of a door closing on a life that was never truly mine.